Good morning. Last few classes, we have been discussing about micro environment of business. So we did go through various functional areas. We also discussed competitors' intelligence, customer analysis. We also had a discussion on the significance of managing supply chain and distribution network in the previous session. And from today's session onwards, we will begin the discussion on the macro environment of business. Now, one of the differentiating factors between the internal and external environment is that, especially the macro environment, is an external business environment, and macro environmental factors and forces cannot be controlled by business. A business cannot change them. So the only option is to customize your strategies and modify your execution policies to accommodate these changes. And in most cases, it is generally perceived that these external forces, macro environmental factors like politics, economic policies, culture, technology, these factors pose a threat and challenges to business, but that's not the case. Even though these policies, these factors and forces do pose challenge and threats, on the other hand, they also create opportunity. So it is very important for a business to constantly keep monitoring these external or the macroeconomic factors to figure out what kind of challenges and threats these changes poses business, and also what opportunities are offered by them. Now, one of the reasons why you have the flood of EV startups of late is because the government of India is now favoring and providing a lot of subsidies, right? Providing a lot of subsidies to these EV startups. So there is a wave all of a sudden, so many companies flourishing overnight. The reason is the government of India has now come up with policies that is totally in the favor of those companies who want to start manufacturing electric vehicles in India. So this policy of the government has created a lot of business opportunity. It has created a lot of buzz in the industry. So, which is actually good. But there are some policies which are making, especially our foreign companies, extremely uncomfortable. These foreign companies, multinational companies, transnational companies, they operate globally. They have good understanding of business. They are financially sound, technologically sound, strategy wise, they are good. They have the best management expertise. They can compete with any kind of organization. But on the one hand, government of India is welcoming foreign direct investment. On the other hand, it is dampening the spirit of foreign companies by executing certain policies. Government of India came up with Atmanirbhar Bharat, which aims to promote domestic manufacturing, which aims to promote domestic industry, even though there are no serious measures, serious ecosystem created for the growth and progress of domestic setup, but still the policy is there. On the other hand, because of this policy, government has put a lot of restriction on international trade. Excise duties have been high, tariffs have been deliberately increased so that imports can be substituted. And there are also allegations that Chinese companies are being specifically targeted. So therefore, policies can create opportunities. The same policies can also pose a lot of threat. So it is very important for businesses to understand. And to begin with, it is very important to understand political environment, because the government is formed by a specific political party through a structured system. And this political party, which has formed the government, creates policies, laws. It creates conducive business environment, creates an ecosystem where industry and businesses can flourish. So therefore, if these political parties who form the government, if their policies are not in the favor of business, if their policies do not promote growth and development of business, if their policies is unable to create a conducive economic environment for business, then businesses will have serious challenges to operate in that country, to grow in that country. So therefore, understanding the political system, understanding the political environment is extremely crucial, right? So what kind of components are we going to study in political environment? So in political environment, we are going to study four major components. First one is the political system, political risks, political ideologies, and most importantly, indicators of political instability. In order to identify a specific disease, we usually get symptoms, right? Whether a patient has COVID or not, there are symptoms. Similarly, whether the political system is efficient or highly inefficient, there are symptoms. So these symptoms are called indicators of political instability. So we will also discuss what are these indicators of political instability, right? So these are the components which we will be discussing in today's class. So we will begin with political system. Political system is the composition of the government, its basic structure, and the manner in which the government gets elected. So in countries across the globe, we get to see countries in which people have the right to choose who their government should be. Unfortunately, we also have countries in the world where people have no choice but to embrace whichever government is there. That government will become a permanent government and it will rule. So when we say this permanent, it can either be a autocracy or it can be also in the form of a monarchy. So we get to see both, right? We have our neighbor who follows autocratic form of government in China. And we also have countries like Saudi Arabia where there is monarchy and kingdom system. And then we also have democracy. So which is good for business is something which we need to understand. And we need to understand limitations of both the systems because you can't straight away come to a conclusion and say that, okay, autocracy is bad and democracy is good. Generally, it is perceived like that autocracy is not good for business and democracy is best for business, democratic form of political system. It all depends because by looking at the events that have unfolded in the last few years in countries like USA, in countries like India, we can come to a conclusion that more than autocracy and democracy, it is the quality of the leadership, it is the quality of the governance that plays an instrumental role, whether it is autocracy or democracy. India is the largest democracy in the world, right? But even though we are the largest democracy, we need to evaluate how efficient is our governance system. We need to identify the quality of leadership which we have. On the other hand, Chinese embrace autocracy, but look at the kind of life the people have there. They don't have freedom of speech. They don't have any kind of liberty, freedom of expression, right? Some of the things that our constitution guarantees, it is denied in China because of its political system, which is autocratic form of government. So in autocracy, or whether it is a monarchy, all the decision making is vested in the hand of one or few people. There is a centralized decision making. Now, the good thing about autocracy is that the decision making process is very quick, instantaneous, spontaneous. There is no lag or delay. There is no debates and discussion here. Unlike in democracy, where every law, before it is passed in the parliament, it gets debated, deliberated, it goes for a review. Parliamentary committees, various committees review it. Finally, it goes to president. President evaluates and see if the law is compatible with the constitution, and then it gets approved. So there is a structured mechanism of scrutinizing, rationalizing the policies. But that is something which you don't find in autocracy. Autocracy, you need to question the very basis of decision making. On what basis these political leaders who embrace autocracy, how do they make decisions? Is it there on their gut feeling? Or is it on some sort of a religious beliefs they have? So what is their basis of decision making? How do they make decisions? And most of the time, their decisions are controversial. They are forcefully imposed on the citizens. And most importantly, businesses should also embrace these decisions. Businesses have no voice. Businesses cannot raise concerns about the decision of the government. The kind of freedom what businesses get in India under, not just India, under democratic form of political system, the same kind of freedom businesses do not get in autocracy. In India or in any form of autocratic, so in any form of democratic country, businesses can challenge the decisions of the government. A business can file a case against the government in the court of law, because here parliament is different, judiciary is different. But in autocracy, it's not the same. You cannot voice out your concerns against these political leaders. You cannot voice out your concern against the government in autocratic form of system. So as a result, yes, generally autocracy is not good for business. A very good example is something which happened to Google in China, right? Any country in the world is said to be a prospective and a big market if it has a huge population size. And obviously, China is a leader when it comes to population. And of course, we are not way behind. It is estimated that in the year 2050, that India will overtake China and we will become the most populated country in the world, beating China. So every company in the world wants to do business in a country where the population size is huge. Population is a very important benchmark. It is the deciding factor of market. So any MNC in the world wants to do business in China, India, and Brazil because of the sheer size of population what we have. Even though we have always been taught in our schools that population is bad, population is a curse, population explosion is the most terrible thing that can happen to a country. But that's not the case. It all depends on how you manage your human resources, right? Just because our governments and our leaders have been incapable of managing the population, we have always thought that population is a curse. But that's not the case. Population can be such an important resource for any country. Canada is struggling because they don't have people there. There's no population there, right? And every country wants to do business in India, China, and Brazil because of its population. We have a market. So obviously, Google wanted to do business in China because the market is quite big. When we go about the number of internet user, after USA, China has the second largest internet users base in the world. So obviously, China was one of the prospects or a prospective market for Google. So it did venture into China and started doing its business. But unfortunately, things started to go wrong for a simple reason that in China, there's no freedom of expression. There is no freedom of voice. If you have any problem with the government, if citizens are unhappy with the government of policies, right, they can't voice out their concern. They have no right to protest. So Google provided a platform. It had social media sites like Orkut, Blogger, Gmail, wherein people started voicing out their concerns about government's inefficiency, government's malpractices, right? The wrongdoings of the government. And the moment Chinese government learned about this, they immediately sent a notice to Google to remove all the content which is against the government from the internet. So if somebody searches anything about Chinese government on internet, no negative content should come in the search results. No negative content should be there on social media platforms. So that was the notice which was sent to Google. And all domestic players were complying with this. And all Chinese media is also government favored media only. So they will never speak anything against the government. And as far as Indian media is concerned, I mean, you people should decide, the way things are going on for the last 5, 6 years. So obviously, even though we are a democratic country, but still there is a question about integrity of our media also. And it is quite evident from the kind of rankings we have got. But nonetheless, let's come back to China, right? So Google did not oblige. Chinese government said remove all the anti-government content from the internet. Google said no, it's not against it is totally against the policy of the company. So we can't do this. So Google kept on sending notice. Sorry, the Chinese government kept on sending notices to Google. Google did not budge. And it is alleged that Chinese government appointed hackers, and these hackers hacked into the servers of Google to delete all the anti-government content. And this led to a war, a kind of a cold war, not just between Google and China, between USA and China. And finally, Google decided to pull out from China because of censorship. So that is what happens in autocracy. You have to dance according to the tunes of the government. You have no voice, you have no freedom. And it's not just with foreign companies, even its own domestic companies, Chinese government is making life miserable. You know what happened with Ant, the famous Alibaba.com, Jack Ma's business establishments. Jack Ma disappeared all of a sudden. And there was no news. Where is he? Because Chinese government, media, it's under the government of, it's under the control of the government. And international press also does not have any kind of hold in China. So Chinese government indirectly wanted to take over the growing business of Ant or the Alibaba group. And that is what the government is in the process of. So one day government decides you should not do business. I will do your business. You have to give up. So there is no voice. You can't take the government to the court of law. So there's no such provision in autocracy. And sometimes these autocratic leaders, they are theocratic, they are religious fanatics, they follow some sort of extreme religious perceptions, beliefs. And sometimes there are leaders who are secular who do not follow any religion. So we have both of these categories that exist in the world. Then you have democracy, and we being a democratic country, so we know what are the kind of possibilities that democracy offers. Democracy, the decision making happens collectively. The parliament is the deciding authority. It's not based on the majority rule, who has the majority. Even though a government may have absolute majority, still it is the responsibility of the government to present its proposals, its bills in the parliament, get debated, take the feedback of the opposition parties, and then finally make the bills into laws and then execute it. That's the spirit of democracy. Whether we are still embracing this spirit or not, or of late the spirit is being hit, that is something that we can obviously debate. But that's the basic structure of democracy. Democracy gives freedom of speech, freedom of voice. So businesses definitely want a country where there is a freedom of voice, freedom of speech. They can represent themselves, they can voice out their concern. They don't want censorship, right? They don't want decisions to be forced on them. So yes, democracy is a better form of political system. But as I mentioned, I did make a statement that we cannot assume that autocracy is bad and democracy is always good. It all depends on the efficiency of the governments and the quality of leadership. So that is what matters at the end. Democracy also has its own limitation. The decision making in democracy is very slow, and this do affect the growth of industry and business in general, especially in the context of the number of parties that exist in a country. Imagine in a multi-party system, if nobody gets a majority, it will be a hung parliament, hung assembly. So there will be a coalition government, and coalition government is a disaster for the business. We all are aware of that, right? Because no political party can make a firm decision. Decisions are postponed, and there's always a chance of government falling. All sorts of issues do creep in. So democracy also has its own limitations. Now, the other dimension is the political ideology. Now, all of us are aware what ideology means. Basically, these are kind of principles that guide us. So whether it is an organization, a company, an institution, or a political organization, or an individual like us, we always have a set of beliefs based upon which our decisions are made. So these beliefs are our guiding principles. These philosophies are guiding principles. And it's the same case with any institution. So political parties, whether it is a small or big, each political party, whether it is in India or anywhere else in the world, has its own set of principles and philosophies based on which it operates. And these principles, philosophies becomes guiding force for their decision making, for their policies. So when these political parties form a government, the decisions what they take, the policies what they make, the laws what they create, they are directly or indirectly influenced by their philosophies, their beliefs, their value system. So in this context, we have three broader ideologies that we get to observe, not just in India, everywhere in the world. The first one is called leftist ideology or the left parties. Now, these leftist or the left parties ideologies are based on the concept of socialism. Now, socialism is a concept that advocates public welfare, that advocates a concept that government is like a parent and citizens are like children. And it is the responsibility of the government to provide all the facilities and benefits to its citizens at an affordable price or probably free of cost. And government should take care and manage all the economic activities. So when we say government should manage all the economic activities, one of the underlying principle of socialism or leftist ideology, what it means is that all the economic activities should be controlled by the government itself, which means all the banks should be operated by the government. All the insurance companies should be operated by the government. All the educational institutions should be operated by the government. All the healthcare facilities should be operated by the government. So government is the in charge of all economic activities, which means there is no scope for private players, which means business cannot flourish. Or in case if businesses are allowed, there are a lot of restrictions. And socialism or the leftist ideology does not believes in globalization. It does not believes in privatization. So this is a ideology of leftist parties. And leftist parties are secular parties. They do not favor any religion. They do not politicize religion itself. Now, an extreme opposite of this is your right-wing parties. Right-wing believes value tradition. They are about equity, survival of the fittest. They believe in economic freedom. On the other hand, their decision making is influenced by politicized version of religion. They are believers of extremism. Their policies and laws are highly influenced by religious philosophies, religious beliefs, religious misconceptions. So this is the other version. And in between, we have center parties. Center parties believe in secularism. They do not get influenced by any religion. And most importantly, they believe in growth, economic development, economic prosperity. They believe in capitalism. They want globalization. They want more and more private companies to operate freely and independently. They don't want any kind of government intervention in the operations of private companies. So they value freedom. They want complete freedom to be given to the companies. So these are the three extremes of uh, political ideology. And of late, we have a combination which has emerged, just the way you get combo packs when you go to McDonald's. So here also you have some sort of a combination. So you have right, center, right, left. Right, left will not be there, obviously, because they're extreme. So you have left, center, and right, center. So which political party follows what type of ideology in India? So here is the table for you. So one of the important area that needs to be addressed here is why should we understand the ideology? Whichever ideology the political party is following, in what way does it impact business operations? In what way that affects the growth and prospects of business? Now, let me give you an example. Probably this will give you a better perspective. A couple of years back, we had a government in Karnataka which did came up with a set of new guidelines. This government was totally against Western culture. They didn't wanted the pub culture, the club culture, the nightlife culture to exist, and therefore they came up with a set of measures. They issued guidelines. The guidelines were simple. All the pubs, clubs, bars, discos can no longer operate after 10. So why should we follow Western culture? So let's not do that. Let's follow our own set of traditions. Let's not get succumbed to Western culture. So let's close this nonsense. And they decided to close this. So no more pubs, no more culture, no more pubs, no more clubs, no more bars after 10 p.m. Now, that was the ideology behind this decision, which did impact the businesses. The business growth was severely hit. Tourism industry, hospitality industry, transport industry got severely affected. But after some time, when the government term got over, we got another government which had an extremely opposite view. The view that Bangalore is the Silicon Valley of India. Bangalore is the city that has put India on the global map. Bangalore is a city which is the startup hub of Asia. A city of this stature should have nightlife. A city of this stature should have global outlook. A city of this stature should be open-minded. And therefore, let's allow businesses to operate 24 hours. So shopping malls, please open 24 hours. You are permitted. Even though shopping malls are not operational 24 hours, but permission is given. They can if they want to. Right? Restaurants, 24 hours. Bars, clubs, pubs, discos, up to 12. And it did definitely help businesses grow, nurture, right? So look at how these ideological views gets penetrated into the governance, gets penetrated into the policies and decision makings. And these policies and decisions making can make or break business. As simple as that. Now, all of you are aware the next FIFA World Cup will be held in Qatar, which is one of the Middle Eastern countries. And there also you get to follow this right-wing ideology only, right? Ideology based on religious beliefs, right? Superstitions, beliefs, right? And in order to host an event like FIFA, you need to be a country with global outlook. And just to accommodate this event, the political party has decided to change its ideology only. New stadiums are being already built. Billions of dollars of rupees are spent on creating new infrastructure. Five-star hotels are being allowed to serve liquor, which is against the religious beliefs, right? And this has created altogether a different business opportunity in Qatar, which nobody envisioned that it would happen one day, right? So imagine how ideologies can impact business. Imagine tomorrow a new political party comes and this political party has very extreme ideas. The way Taliban has, women should not go out, women should not drive car, we should not wear jeans. So imagine this political party says, if you wear jeans, that's it, you're gone. Shoot at sight. If such is the political ideologies, what will happen to denim industry then? What will happen to textile industry? Right? So I'm just giving you an idea as to how these ideologies can affect the growth and prospects of business. Right. Finally, let's talk about the indicators of political instability, because I told you that there are four components. Yes, in fact, we are yet to discuss the third component. The third component is political risk. So let's talk about political risks. What are the different types of political risks and how this political risks can impact the prospects of business? The first of all, what is risk? Risk is an uncertain event. And if this event occurs, which may or which may not, but if this event occurs, you encounter huge losses. So political risk refers to decisions of the political parties which may affect the business prospects and growth. So the first in this list is nationalization. And you all are familiar with the term nationalization because in India, we have so-called famous nationalized banks. These nationalized banks are banks owned by government. They are also called as public sector undertakings. But these banks were once upon a time not government banks. These were private banks. Government forcefully converted them into government banks. Government took their ownership and made them government banks. Is it good for business? The answer is it is disastrous. Imagine if Chinese government nationalizes Alibaba.com and Alibaba group of companies. Imagine if government of India takes over Flipkart and Amazon and makes them a government company. India government is doing opposite. It is selling all government companies to private sector. So we are not following nationalization. But once upon a time, we did this under Indira Gandhi's government, right? Dozens of national banks, dozens of private banks were converted into national banks, government banks. Even insurance companies from private became government. Now, what might be the reason behind it? What's the rationality behind it? The rationality behind this various reasons. One of the reasons is the kind of frauds that happen, lack of trust. Even now, to a great extent, people do trust only nationalized banks. They don't want to keep their money in private bank like ICICI or foreign bank like HSBC. They still believe only public sector banks. Because even now, even though we don't follow the concept of nationalism anymore, even now, every year there's one or the other bank fraud that happens in India, because of which people have some inhibitions, right? Some apprehensions when it comes to keeping their money in private banks. So as a result of this, those days people completely lost faith in private banks, and government was forced to convert them into government banks. So this is called nationalization. Then you also have expropriation. Expropriation is a concept where your assets are taken by the government, but it gives you compensation. So there's a difference between nationalization and expropriation. In nationalization, your business identity itself gets eroded. You are no longer in existence. But in expropriation, government just wants one of your assets, and for which it is also paying you money. Imagine you have a big showroom in Brigade Road, right? And now government wants to take over your showroom. Government wants to buy your showroom for road widening, right? We always crib in Bangalore, and the reason why we crib is because the kind of pathetic and third class infrastructure what we have. Look at our roads. There was a time when we used to get potholes in the road. Now we have to find road in the potholes, right? So that's the kind of infrastructure Bangalore has. So definitely we always want good infrastructure. When you're saying Bangalore is a silicon city, right? When you are very proud the kind of achievements what Bangalore has done, but these achievements are not justified with the kind of infrastructure what we have. So imagine government now comes up with a new plan that Bangalore should be like Singapore, right? Roads should be hygienically clean. We should have freeways within the city itself. So it decides to make a 6-lane road on Brigade Road. So you are losing your shop there. So you close your shop, take the money, go and set up somewhere else. You can do business, but in nationalization, you're losing your business identity, you're losing your existence. But here it's not the case. Government just wants your building, that shop, that location, so that the government can use it for road widening, and government is paying you market rate, something which Bangalore Metro Rail Corporation is doing. It has taken over so many properties, and it has given price which is 10 times the market rate also. So that is what expropriation means. But confiscation, there's a small twist. It is same as expropriation, but without compensation. Imagine government takes over your property and gives you nothing. It sounds so ridiculous and dangerous. So in India, we don't have nationalization. We had once upon a time, but it's no longer. There's no scope for nationalization now. Confiscation does not exist at all. It is very disastrous even to think. Expropriation does exist. Government takes over your assets, gives compensation. Obviously, you would choose expropriation. I mean, if I ask you to choose which one you want, confiscation or expropriation, you would choose expropriation. But I would say even expropriation is disastrous. Even though you are getting compensation, you might be getting 10 times the amount of value. The problem is you're losing business opportunity permanently. Brigade Road has a stature, right? The same kind of business opportunity tomorrow, if you open shop somewhere else, you will not get the same business opportunity. So you're losing that opportunity permanently. So expropriation is also dangerous for business. It is also a risk for business. The last one is domestication. Domestication is a concept where government favors domestic industry, domestic companies, but foreign companies are not given those kind of favors, but rather foreign companies are punished with higher taxes, higher tariffs, strict policies. It's like giving stepmotherly treatment to foreign companies, which is again disastrous. I mean, yes, it's good to promote your domestic companies, but you should create a competitive spirit. You should not favor domestic and, you know, punish foreign companies. On the one hand, you're saying foreign companies to come and do business in your country. On the other hand, you're not favoring them. So it looks like double standards. So that should not happen, right? So it is not good. It does not create conducive and a competitive business environment. So that's the reason it is called a risk, right? Of late, Indian government is also accused of threatening Chinese companies. In fact, Chinese companies of late have been raided by various authorities, enforcement directorate, income tax authorities, all are behind Chinese companies. So there is a perception created that Indian government is specifically targeting Chinese companies, right? So obviously, it does not create a good impression in the international business context also, right? So therefore, domestication is also very harmful. Finally, let's talk about the indicators of political instability. Now, what are these indicators of political instability? As I mentioned, these are like symptoms. If these symptoms you find in a particular country, that country is not ideal to do business. The first one is corruption. Now, corruption, you know, is not good for any businesses, for any kind of business, individuals, right? Even though we cannot feel proud that we are a corruption-free country, yes, corruption is rampant in India also. But when I was going through the list of the most corrupt countries in the world, I was so relieved that we are in somewhere 170 or 175 position. Imagine being 170th country, corrupt country in the world. We are so angry about our system. The country which is at number one position, what should be the state of mind of the citizen and businesses in that country, right? And bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is a red tapeism. Too much of complications, procedures, making a mandate to obtain necessary licenses, making life difficult to obtain licenses. In fact, when we look at the complexity of bureaucracy in India, India stands at the bottom, which means there is high degree of complexity in India when it comes to doing business. Still, license Raj does exist, even though Manmohan Singh did liberalize, globalize, and privatize Indian economy in the year 1991 and challenged to do away with license Raj. But still, this license Raj do exist. These bureaucrats makes your life difficult, right? If you want to experience Indian bureaucracy, please go and make one driving license in the nearest RTA office. Before applying for a license in RTA office on your own, first thing you have to do is buy a Paragon Hawaii Chappal. By the time your Paragon Hawaii Chappal is worn out, you will get your license. But in case if you pay under the table money, license will be delivered to your doorstep. That's the kind of bureaucracy that exists, right? It's a known fact. So bureaucracy should not be there technically, but if it exists, it's an indicator of bad political system. Attitudes of national also at times makes things worse, right? And because of the kind of standoff what the government has with China and Pakistan, the government also has created that kind of a atmosphere fueled by this social media platform hatred, that an attitude is being created that we should hate Chinese, we should hate Pakistanis, we should hate their products. And it did happen during IPL. The BCCI went to an extent of removing Vivo as a title sponsorship. It should have removed permanently. Why it was removed only for 1 year? That's a question we have to ask, right? Again, Vivo is back as a sponsor of IPL. Only 1 year it was. So that means we hate China only for 1 year. From next year onwards, we have started loving China. Right? So all these are political gimmicks. All these are things which political parties do, right? So something which ultimately the business fraternity is the one which has to suffer. Political unrest. happens when peace becomes pieces, right? When there is no peace, when there are riots, when there is hatred, communal violence, lynching of people, right? Something which of late has been a regular feature in India, highlighted by various international agencies and media, is also an indicator of political unrest, right? In fact, US government booked Facebook, and Facebook India controller was removed from the job for favoring the government during 2014 elections. And there are allegations, and it was proved in US that Facebook deliberately promoted hate speeches in India. So these kind of things are not good. These are indicators of bad political system, right? And of late, you have also seen how brands have also faced backlash for making certain ads, right? So all these are giving us these indicators, uh, right? Indications. Now, what you should have is voice and accountability. There should be absence of violence. Government effectiveness should be all-time high. Regulatory quality should be good. Rule of law should be very efficient. There should not be corruption, and civil wars should not happen. This is something which is expected. Now, this table will give you some idea. Most politically stable countries in the world, most of them are from Europe, Norway, Denmark, Canada, Sweden, Finland, and least politically stable countries in the world. Probably all of them are from Africa. So Zimbabwe, Chad, Congo, Cambodia, Sudan. Peace and conflict index, the next one, most peaceful countries in the world. And on the right hand side, you find the most conflicted countries in the world. Foreign policy, fragile and failed. Least fragile countries includes Denmark. They have very good foreign policies. On the right, you will see countries who have a failed foreign policies in the world. So this is something which is important from the perspective of business. We can say political environment has direct impact on the progress, on the growth, on the operations of the business, and therefore it needs to be critically evaluated before business operations could begin. So with this, we will wind up today's session.